This is Victoria Chow, and I will discuss the draft EIR EIS for the Littlerock Reservoir Sediment Removal Project. Since the initial construction of the Littlerock Dam in 1924, sediments accumulated which reduced the storage capacity. The 1992 restoration project raised the dam height to increase the storage capacity, but did not excavate sediment due to the presence of federally endangered arroyo toad upstream. Since then, the reservoir capacity continues to be reduced because of natural sedimentation behind the dam. The City of Palmdale Water District, which is the dam operator, applied for a special use permit with the federal USDA Forest Service, the land manager, to implement the current proposed action to construct a grade control structure upstream of the dam and excavate sediment out of the reservoir. Palmdale Water District and Forest Service jointly prepared the draft EIR pursuant to CEQA, the State Environmental Assessment Process, and the draft EIS pursuant to NEPA. The Forest Service must determine whether to issue a special use permit to authorize the Palmdale Water District to implement the proposed action or alternative in the record of decision. Other federal, state, and local agencies will rely on this EIS, EIR to inform their own decisions over issuance of specific permits related to the project. For example, the EIS would inform the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for a permit under the Endangered Species Act. The purpose of the proposed action is to restore the water storage and flood control capacity to the 1992 baseline, to maintain that 1992 capacity, and to preserve the federally endangered arroyo toad habitat while concurrently preventing sediment loss and head cutting in the stream channel. The ultimate need of the project is to increase the water storage capacity that would service the lower communities. The proposed action would construct a subterranean grade control structure across the channel from bank to bank, which would help prevent sediment loss and ultimately preserve arroyo toad habitat. The proposed action would also excavate approximately 1 million cubic yards of sediment to restore the reservoir capacity and increase water storage. For the alternative screening methodology, first it developed clear descriptions of each alternative. Second, it evaluated each alternative based on fulfilling project purpose and need, potential to lessen adverse effects, and potential for environmental advantages. Third, it addressed feasibility based on a series of requirements. Alternatives eliminated from full consideration include alternate locations for dredged material disposals, range of excavation amounts, and raising dam height to increase capacity. The two remaining alternatives evaluated in the document is the reduced sediment removal intensity, or Alternative 1, and the no action alternative. The Alternative 1 would reduce the annual amount of sediment removed and the number of daily truck trips, but not the total amount to be removed. The no action alternative would not alter the existing conditions of the reservoir or dam. The document gathered baseline setting data through surveys, literature review, and agency consultations. Some assumptions include a baseline condition starting in 2014, the proposed action completing in 7 years, and Alternative 1 completing in 13 years. The no action alternative was assumed to ultimately result in dam demolition and removal due to the sediment accumulation issue. Criteria pollutants were measured, and residences were considered as the only sensitive receptor. Habitat types include open water in the reservoir, upland, riparian, and woodland habitat along the haul roads, and juniper woodland at the disposal site. Several threatened and endangered listed species include arroyo toad occurring or having the potential to occur. The reservoir contains fish with elevated levels of contaminants. The area has flashy storm events, and the 2013 capacity of the reservoir is approximately 3,000 acre-feet. The reservoir is located in the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, surrounded by campgrounds, OHV, and reservoir recreation area. The document describes peak traffic hours for mostly 2-lane roads. Visual resources are moderate to high quality with moderate viewer concern, low viewer exposure, and low to moderate viewer sensitivity. The water in the project area was designated with certain beneficial uses, which has certain regulatory requirements. The reservoir is designated as an impaired water body due to metals. These are just some of the significant affected environments that were discussed in the document. The EIR-EIS used a descriptive checklist to evaluate impacts. A list of criteria for each affected environment were developed with direction from CEQA and agency guidelines. The significance determination was divided into Class 1 for significant that can't be mitigated, Class 2 for reduced to less than significant with mitigation implemented, Class 3 for adverse impact but not significant, and Class 4 for beneficial effects. Assumptions used to assess the impacts include work schedule and level of effort, and type, number, and level of use for equipment. Estimates for pollution discharge were developed through literature research, models, and professional knowledge and experience. The irreversible and irretrievable commitment of resources were speculative for fuel costs, or not defined clearly, or not defined at all. There was no mention of cost estimates in the document. There would be increased air pollutant emissions for the proposed action and alternative 1 during construction and operation. The no action assumes dam removal, which would result in increased pollutant emissions. There would be habitat and species impacts for the proposed action and alternative 1. The no action assumes eventual dam removal, which would result in habitat and species impacts. The proposed action in alternative 1 would beneficially impact the hydrology by reducing flood potential and decreasing groundwater reliance due to increased water storage capacity. The no action alternative would increase flood hazard and increase groundwater reliance because of the lower water storage availability in the reservoir. The proposed action in alternative 1 would close the recreation area during construction and operation, which would be significant and unmitigable. The no action assumes dam removal, which would completely lose the reservoir. Increased traffic would occur during construction for the proposed action and alternative, and during the emergency dam removal event. The document concluded that there would be no significant changes to the visual resources. The dam removal with a no action alternative would result in the water reverting back to a natural stream. Sediment removal would impact water quality during construction or emergency dam removal event. The cumulative impact section reviewed completed projects, projects in the process of construction, projects currently under review within a geographic area, and impacts for each resource. Cumulative impacts define spatial and temporal limits for each resources. For example, biological resources would have a 20-mile radius due to connected ecosystem, while recreation resource only has a 5-mile radius due to visual abilities. Temporal limits include projects constructed or operated during the lifetime of this project. In other words, only overlapping activities. Each cumulative impact was assessed for each alternative and evaluated for significance using the Class 1 to 4 criteria. Mitigation measures include limiting emissions, developing plans to limit impacts such as erosion control, noise reduction, spill response, fire control, and traffic control. Obtaining regulatory permits, surveying, monitoring, and avoiding species, and restoring, revegetating, and compensating for habitat. There would be unavoidable adverse impacts to cultural resources and recreation for the proposed action and alternative 1, while the no action alternative concluded that there is unavoidable adverse impacts to a larger suite of resources because of the assumed ultimate dam removal. Short-term soil and biological disturbance during construction would outweigh the long-term benefit of increased water capacity that would serve the surrounding communities. Fuel consumption during construction was the only irreversible and irretrievable commitment of resources defined. In summary, the proposed action would construct a grade control structure and excavate sediment. The reduced intensity alternative, or alternative 1, would do the same thing but over a longer time span. The no action alternative would maintain the existing condition with the assumption that the dam would eventually be removed. Affected resources include air, biological, cultural, hydrology, recreation, transport, visual, and water, with significant and unavoidable impacts to cultural because of the unsurveyed and unknown extent of potential cultural resources, and recreation due to its closure during construction. The significance criteria used Class 1 through 4 and evaluated through a descriptive checklist. There is no draft record of decision attached to this document. The EIR-EIS included all requirements of NEPA regulations and guidelines. It was written in plain language, but it exceeded 500 pages, which made reading for a layperson difficult. Based on my evaluation of the EIR-EIS, the purpose and need of the project is too vague. How much storage capacity increase is needed? The excavation amount did not show a reasonable range for alternatives screening. The no-action alternative assumes demolition of the dam, but that is purely speculative with little to no substantial evidence provided for justification. The baseline conditions were initially defined to be in 2014 when the Notice of Preparation pursuant to CEQA and Notice of Intent pursuant to NEPA was prepared. However, throughout the document, data was gathered for 2013, 2008, and 1992. In addition, there was no water quality data such as turbidity, temperature, or pH included in the document. Sensitive receptors were limited to humans and their residences, but no consideration was made for wildlife. Cumulative impacts were limited to overlapping activities instead of potential impacts further in time. Hopefully, these concerns would be addressed before the project is approved and implemented.